Welcome to the CO241 class on MySQL tools and introduction to the database. First of all, let's log into Blackboard and see what we have scheduled for today, i.e. let's try Firefox. Okay, so web databases, assignments. Today we have week 5. So we will have the PHP test later on, and we are going to cover connecting to MySQL. We are going to talk about result sets, arrays, displaying database information on web pages. We are going to demo a number of tools and how to access the database. Okay, so let's get started with the fact of the database is installed, and on the Windows system it runs as a service. To see whether the database is running or not, you go to Start, Control Panel. No, that's not even it. You go to Taskbar and then Task Manager. If under processes, then you should be able to see a MySQL process, MySQL D. From the control panel, if you go to Admin Tools and then Services, you should see the MySQL service running. MySQL right here. And of course it doesn't show. Here's the reason why this doesn't show. Our MySQL database is running as part of the Acquia control panel. So it doesn't show started as a service. It runs as part of this interface. So if I was to say stop, we see MySQL D disappearing. So on most Windows servers, you should be able to go to services and verify that MySQL service is running. On our systems, that's not the case because we're not running MySQL as a service. We're running it out of the control panel. But a sure way to see if MySQL is running is to see in the process list that MySQL D is present. Okay, so that's how we know that it's running. Yes, MySQL is the name of the company. Now it's called Oracle, but MySQL was this Swedish company. And D stands for daemon. And daemon in Unix is a service. So MySQL D. There is another service called HTTPD. It stands for Apache HTTP Protocol Daemon. FTPD stands for a daemon. So in Unix, everything that ends in D stands for a daemon or a service. And that's what it means right here. Okay, so now that we have verify that the database is running, let's look at where it is installed. And our database is installed under Program Files, Acquia Drupal. This is where Apache is installed, this is where PHP is installed, and this exactly is where MySQL is installed. If you open the MySQL directory, you'll find important directories. Bin is where our services are located. If you would like to verify that the database has integrity, that the data is not corrupted, MySQL check would do that for you per file. MySQL D is our daemon. MySQL Admin is an admin utility that allows you to start and stop the database, modify the passwords in the database, and do other things as well. MySQL all by itself is a client program. You can use this program to actually access the database. Finally, MySQL D is just a it's a batch script which is going to start the MySQL database with a specific config file. And this is the config file for the database. So some of the options that you can see in the config file are where the error log file is stored, what's the port number that the database is running on. Remember, during our Acquia setup, we chose the port number and we chose 3306. Well, that's the config file that manages that. If you wanted to change the port number, just modify it here and then restart the Acquia Dev desktop. I want to keep this at 3306 because all the client tools expect port 3306 to be open and have the database on it. Okay, some of the other files here have to do with what will be the capacity of the database. So a large database, you want to make sure that it has a lot of memory available and that it can have many processes. A workstation system like ours, you don't want to use that much memory on the database, so you modify it here. Also, we have here InnoDB, which is a very special case for MySQL. MySQL is the actual engine, the database engine, that can work with multiple file engines. What that means is that the structure of the file that the database stores its data in can be either simple, and then this type of a file is called MyISAM, or it can be complicated with transactions, and then it's InnoDB. Okay, Oracle has a license on InnoDB, but this is how you can have transactions. Transactions are very interesting. In a database, you can insert data, and that's great. But what if you wanted to insert a lot of data all at the same time? That is physically impossible. So databases include this special functionality called transactions, where you say, I'm starting a transaction, and the database knows that from now on, it's not going to write any data until the transaction says commit. At that point, you're going to write all the data at the same time to the database, which means that all users oftentimes are locked out of the database until you stop editing it. And that's you can have the kind of a database lock. It's really silly when you end up having the same user try to write to a file, lock it, but through a different process try to unlock the same file, and that's called a deadlock. That's when the database is stuck forever until you restart it, because it's trying to write something, but to write it, it has to have a lock on the same file. And so InnoDB will provide us with this high complexity transactional behavior. And when you create a table, you specify whether the files for the table will be simple with MyISAM or complicated like with InnoDB. Okay, here is another part of the config file. Under the client title, it tells you that these settings apply not to the database itself, but to the client program that's accessing it. So in the client program, you no longer have to specify the port number or even the username. These are defaulted here in the config file. All right. Any questions about the config file? This config file can be very complicated, but to read more about it, go to mysql.com and look at the manual for it. Okay, it's a text file, and it basically takes parameters and passes them to the database. Okay, here is another important directory: data. Data is where all the database data is stored. For each database, you have a separate directory. Inside of my database called Acquia Drupal, I have a number of files. Let me list them by name. I have files that end in .frm. All right, and these files, if I try to open them with a notepad, right, I can't really make sense out of them. But this is where the database data is stored. That's where the database that's where the data goes. And so some files have more data in them than others, right? If you want to back up the database, a safe way to do that is to shut the database down and then copy one of these folders. and now this is a backup for my database, and I can move it to some external device so that it's safe. All right. You don't want to do that when the database is running. Why would that be, do you think? Why don't you want to do a backup when the database is running? Exactly. So what's going to happen is you're trying to write to this file, you're copying it at the same time, which means that you're either getting an incomplete file or you're getting it a pre-copy state. Either way, the data may not be correct, which is why you might have to later run one of those MySQL check commands. All right, so that's what the database looks like under the hood. All right, this is the physical implementation of the database. We primarily are going to work with a logical implementation, which means we'll use commands like create database, we'll use commands like create table, and those will automatically create the files for us. So we're looking sort of at the back end of it. We see what the physical implementation is. All right, so that's here in MySQL. Now, let me show you the first program that we'll use to connect to the database. All right, this program is actually called MySQL Query. MySQL Query you can download from MySQL.com. Today it's part of a suite of programs called MySQL Workbench. You go to MySQL.com, you download it, and you can have it for free. Okay, you don't pay for the program. When I start it, I can see that this is a GUI. I love GUIs. Okay, command line is hard. All right, I'll show you later. Command line is hard. Yes. No, MySQL Administrator is another program I'll show you in a minute, but it's a different program. It's not going to allow you to see data, but it'll allow you to configure the server, add new users, and do things like that. You should have that inside of your virtual machine. MySQL Query right on the desktop. Yeah, it should be there. So here's the thing. To connect to a MySQL database, you are going to need the same piece of information from any program. The first one is server host, meaning where in the world is the server located. It can be in Asia, it can be in Europe, it doesn't matter. As long as you have the IP address, you're golden, right? Our server is on localhost, so that's what we're going to use. Then you have to have the port number, which is why we wanted to use the default. You have to provide the username, the password, and then this GUI asks you to provide the default database. So what's the first database that we want to be connected to? Other client programs will make it optional, so you can choose that later. This information is actually sufficient to connect to our database because the root user exists and there's no password on the database. I'll press OK, and now I am logged in to the server. And if you look at the schema tab, this is the list of my databases, and I am looking at the test database, which is currently empty. All right, is your desktop running, dev desktop? Did you change the default port? All right. Let me unhook my microphone, and I'll let me pause the. There we go. We'll do this right here. So, double-click on MySQL Query browser, press OK, and we are inside of the database server. Now, the data directory for the test database is completely empty. You don't have to do that. I just want to show you what will happen if I say create table, my table, and then define inside maybe integer x and first name of varchar 200. See what happens. Well, let's try the other way around. where x is first, followed by integer. Okay, now I created a table with two simple columns, but notice that I now have a corresponding file inside of the database, right? So that's how tables connect to files. Just wanted you to see that. All right, we are going to work with these kinds of statements like create table in about 2 weeks. All right, we'll talk about drops, create. For now, we are going to work with a very simple statement, that's a select statement, and we're not going to go into very many details of it. Next week we'll go into details of it. I would like to look at a different database. I want to see my Drupal database. All right, I will right click on Acquia Drupal and I will say make default schema. Do not say drop schema, that will be bad. Say make default schema, and the schema is now in bold, and that's my default database. I can open up this database and look, I can see all the tables that are present. Okay, I can issue a command to see all the users on the system, and I'll do that by saying select star from users and then execute. Okay, this is a simple query. If I do not know how to write this query, which by the time this class is over you will, but if you do not, you just double click on this table and it'll write the query for you. Okay, that's very convenient. It'll write the query for you. If I was to maybe use a different table, the sessions table will have all the users that are currently logged in to my Drupal website. Okay, I have 2 users that are on the site. When you double click on any of these, it'll show you the specific data from inside of the table. Let's see, for the needs of the demos, let's pick a table, maybe the system table. Here is the data in the system table. It has URLs to different parts of Drupal. It has names and then what module it came from. So this is a sample data from our database that we'll try to see in the various tools that we'll use to connect. So this is called MySQL Query Browser. It's a GUI, and it's a very easy way to look at the data. Please.
I don't have the alphabet in my schema.
Is there another database that are?
I have information schema and test.
Well, that's weird. Let me do this.
Like I use PHP MyAdmin.
Yeah, I would say that you can use any of them. PHP MyAdmin would be the most powerful one because you can use it on your phone. You can use it from any workstation, right? So definitely PHP MyAdmin is going to be the most flexible, and it's installed as part of our Drupal Acquia. Once you start developing, more code, you probably want to gravitate towards a GUI like this query browser. And finally, the command prompt is really where you will end up programming, because the command line is on the server itself. So if you have 1 million records, the command line is going to go through those much quicker than a GUI. Okay, so I would say those are the different stages, but PHP MyAdmin is fine. Yep. Okay, so this is select all from system. Let's try a different tool. Let's minimize this, and this time I will double click on the command prompt. This is the scary black stuff, and I will try to issue just all by itself MySQL. MySQL is not found by default because it's not in our path statement. So to make this happen, I actually have to either set my path correctly, or I have to travel to where MySQL program is stored. And I remember that the MySQL program is under Program Files, Acquia Drupal, bin. So it's under MySQL bin, right? My my path is C program files, Acquia Drupal MySQL bin. All right. If you type in C PROG, then press the tab key, it's going to fill in the rest for you. It's a quick way of getting somewhere in the command line. Okay. Once we are under the bin directory, we can type in dir, which stands for directory, and it shows you what files are present under bin. Right? What files are present under bin, which is great. Now I know that I have mysql.exe, and that's exactly what I was looking for. So if I type in MySQL all by itself, okay, it puts me at the command prompt. It does that, okay, it does that because of this config file that we just looked at a minute ago. It says, okay, when the MySQL client starts, use Drupal user. And it so happens that Drupal user doesn't have a password on it. And I could say something like select user, and it says, oh, Drupal user is the one that you're logged in as. So I will type in quit, okay, and I want to be logged in as the same user as we used with the previous tool, right? So that way we will have the same experience. So I will say MySQL user -u root. Root was the user that we prompted in the GUI. Enter, and it says, oh, no problem. This looks exactly the same as a moment ago, right? But the big difference is that now we're logged in as a different user. I could have provided the following information. I could have said MySQL-h for host, local host. I can also provide a syntax for the port number, but we're going to take the default port. Yes. It's like that, yeah. This is actually DOS. What do you play? Oh, okay. See, I sometimes play the Atari games, and there's a simulator for that too. Yep. Like Moon Rider, I think was one of them.
Actually, there's a separate module or something that I play game, like when I play Pac-Man. Yeah, that's what I use it for, Pac-Man.
Yeah, yeah, that's pretty cool. Yeah, but basically the reason why we're showing this command line is because it works the same in Unix. So so the command line is always the most reliable way of getting to the database. So MySQL-h host localhost -u root. All right. So these are the same parameters as we provided with this tool. Localhost username. Now notice that the command line doesn't ask us for a default schema, which is why right now I have to specify use Acquia Drupal. I misspelled something. Show databases is a command that will show me everything. So use AC key. Oh, I see. It's a underscore, not a dash. So show databases in the command line will display all the databases. You did not have to do it here, right? Show databases already had it ready for you. So show databases, and then use Acquia Drupal as his database change. No problem. So now my default schema, my default database is Acquia Drupal. And look at this. I can say select all from users, and I have the same output I saw in the other tool. Or I can say select all from system. And these are all the same records as we saw here. At the bottom, when it's done, it's going to tell us how many it saw. There should be 128. 128 rows. All right? So the same data, but different tools to get at it. All right, and you know, I can create tables, I can delete data, I can add data right from inside of here. To look at data, just to look through it, it's much easier to do it in a GUI. Right, it's much easier to do it in a GUI. All right, so here are two programs. Let's look at a third program, and that is already installed on our system through PHP. Localhost / PHP MyAdmin. By the way, there's a shortcut button for you right here of the dev desktop. When you click Manage My Database, it'll go ahead and open that URL automatically. This is a really innovative way of dealing with the database because someone wrote PHP scripts to allow you to manage any database and to do all kinds of things with the database. Okay, you can change this, you can check the status of the database. Okay, great, I want to know how my database is doing. You can export the entire database. It's just like a backup. If you want to take your database and put it into Excel spreadsheet, no problem. You can do it right through here. Okay, you can take the database and look inside of it. Look, these are all my tables. I can go to the users table, click on it, and look, now it actually displays the data that I saw a minute ago. By the way, this is not the actual password that I've typed in. I'm not that good, can't remember this many characters, but this is the hash, which means that whatever text password I had, the database stores it as a hash. There's a function called SHA1, which is a one-way encryption function. Just from this string, technically, you're not supposed to figure out what the password is. So what is the use of this, do you think? It is encryption, but if you can't figure out what my password is, how is this useful? See, the key is that every time I log in with my clear text password, it reruns that function, that SHA1 function, and then it compares the output. And then the output is this hash. So if I typed in exactly the same thing, the function is going to give you exactly the same output. But the key and the beauty of the technology is that you can't take now the output and figure back what the function, what the clear text was. Okay, so to run the same script as I was running in the previous tools, I will click on the SQL tab. In the SQL tab, I will type in the same as I typed in the other one. Select all from system. SQL is the language that we'll be studying. Okay, select all from system is an example of it. It's the same thing that I typed in here. It's the same thing that I typed in the command line. And go. And now I have all the same data. It tells me at the top here that, hey, there's a total of 128 rows. They're showing me the first 30 of them. Now I could say, hey, I really want to see all of them. Show more rows. And then it displays all of the rows. Now this interface is so nice that you don't have to know SQL at all to use the database in PHP MyAdmin, right? That's pretty cool. You just press buttons like this delete button, and you can delete the data, or you can edit the data. It's very important that if you're logged in as root, you don't just edit any data, because you can really break the website, right? All this data is very important, especially in the system table. It's sort of like the registry on Windows. A small change can have a big impact on the system. Alright, so again, what we did is we went to the SQL tab and we just typed out code. Notice that what I typed out was just select all from system. When we ran the code, PHP MyAdmin added these little ticks. These ticks are optional. These ticks simply specify inside is going to be a string and it's the table name. So technically, you could have a table name with a space in it. Okay, it's not recommended, don't do that. Having spaces in table names makes all kinds of problems later on with different tools. So just like in file names, it's best not to have spaces. So that's what those ticks are. But then it also puts in this little where clause, and it does it for its own reasons. It does it because later on, when we use the GUI and you start selecting rows, it's easier for the system to create a default where clause. We'll talk about what the where clause does later on. So for us, what will still work is to say select all from system. Okay, select all from system. So this is the basic SQL code that we're using. Okay, so far we have 3 tools. So far, what's your favorite tool? Who likes the command line? All right, I see crickets. And who likes the GUI, the MySQL GUI? Okay, query bench. Okay, and who likes the MyAdmin first? You like the MyAdmin. Okay. Is it Alex? What's your name? Anthony. Anthony, you didn't put your hand up for either one of them. You don't like any of them? Okay. All right. So you like the query browser. Okay. Good. There are more tools. Okay. We can look at more tools. Here is the tool that we have installed, and it's called MySQL Administrator. This tool is going to ask us similar information. It's going to say, okay, where is the database? What's the user? What's the port? But when you connect to it, it's not built to really show you the data, okay? It's built to administer, to manage the database, not really to use it. So it tells us right away, okay, here's the version of your system, here's the IP address that it's stored at. It's smarter than localhost. It knows it's not localhost. There's a real IP to it. It also knows what's been enabled, whether it runs as a service, and which it doesn't. Notice that what happened here momentarily is I lost connection to my database. The truth is that MySQL Administrator, the version that we're using here is very old, 1.1.1. The database that came with Acquia Desktop is version 5. It's a fairly new version. So this Administrator GUI has a few issues with the database. So when your buttons gray out like that, just reconnect. Here's what I typically use this interface for, and that is security. If you really wanted to, you can use the command line for security. All you have to do is you say something like use MySQL, then you say show me what the users table is built like. Okay, there's the users, and then select all from user, and then you start using commands like grant all to create the user and so forth. Okay, that is a pain to do. So the easy thing to do is to use a GUI and create a user. And when it comes to security, you don't want to make a mistake, right? And you want to do it quickly, because someone gets fired, you take the rights away right away, right? Or your CIO calls and says, okay, this is not working, can you fix it? You want to be able to fix it quickly. So the GUI is usually quite useful. So our Drupal user, that's the user that connects PHP to our database. This user has certain privileges, and you can figure out what those privileges are by browsing through this system. Now, for the needs here of the demo, I'll create a new user. This new user is going to be called, well, currently it's called new user. Let's delete this user. So here's how we create a new user. New user, username, demo. Okay. I will put password of demo, confirm password of demo, and we'll say apply changes. From here, I'll go to schema privileges, and now I will give this user select rights on the Acquia Drupal database. So you can be very granular on what a specific user can access. You can say this user can write to this database, but they can't read from it. Yeah, it's a limited benefit account, but might be appropriate. Most likely you will do something like select. This user is going to write as a report. Don't let them modify the data, right? Don't even allow it. So you say the demo user on the Acquia database can only select the data. And the other databases, it doesn't have those rights for. So if I say apply changes, hey, here's a new user, and this user has the rights. Now in MySQL, you can actually specify which host this user can connect from. So if you want this user to be limited to only connect from the workstation from work, okay, I want this user to use only the server console to modify the database. I don't want this user to do it from home when they had a glass of wine, right? I want them to only do it from work. So this is where you would do that. All right, any questions about that? Right, so that's some basics of this particular client. So we'll minimize it. So far we have 4 different clients that allow us to access the database, and that's great. Let me take a quick peek what I have configured here for. Okay, so we don't have Office installed here. Let's see. Give me a moment to see if I can regroup as far as this presentation. Okay, I want to back to PHP MyAdmin just for a second and show you how from a single table you can go to the Export tab and you can say export this particular data to a file like a PDF file or a CSV file, which is really a text file, right? So when you say go, the data gets exported. You can write it somewhere, and then you can open the data with a text file or a text editor, or better even, you can open it with Excel if you wanted to, right? So each row is stored separately. There's a delimiter, and then the row is stored. You can choose what the delimiter is. A lot of times CSV files are going to have a comma, right? So that's the second option here. You can actually export it for Microsoft Excel. All right, let me, what I want to do here is I want to show you what is necessary in order to access MySQL from Microsoft Office. Okay, what's necessary is under Control Panel, under Admin Tools, there is this data source ODBC, Open Database Connectivity, and you have to have a driver called MySQL, which currently we can connect to Oracle, to PeopleSoft, to all kinds of places, but not specifically to MySQL. Why don't we do this? I'll give you 5 to 10 minutes to play with the tools that I showed you so far. Let me regroup here for the demo, and I'll show you how to connect Excel to the database. All right, so let's look at how we can connect our database now to the Office suite. We'll try it with maybe Excel and Access. Both of them are going to connect to the database through something called ODBC. ODBC is a standard that Microsoft uses to connect to other databases. You can connect to Oracle, you can connect to Sybase and other databases. To do that, you go to the ODBC Administrator, make sure that the driver is installed for MySQL, and then you simply are going to say add, specify the MySQL driver, and now you can provide the database. So I'll just call it Drupal. Okay, Drupal database. Now the key is, what is the IP address? Well, the IP address to my virtual system is 172.22.204.111. Okay, so conveniently I can't switch windows. So what we have is 172.22.204 and 111, And user is going to be root and no password. And let's see if we have access to our system. It's thinking really hard. Ooh, failed. Okay, so access denied. You know, access denied is not a bad message because it means that our user is not allowed to access, but then we have connectivity. All right, so that's good. Let's try something different. Let's try the Drupal user. Apparently, the root user is not allowed to connect from any other host than the local host where the database is at. Well, let's go ahead and fix that up on our database. We're going to go to MySQL Administrator. Let's go to Users. Here's our user demo. Here's Select on Acquia Drupal, and we'll make sure that the user could connect from all hosts. Okay, that just means the user can connect from all hosts. And apply changes. Excellent. Refresh. Let's see how that works. See if we can connect now. Drupal, no, demo, test. Successful. Now we can select even the database that we'll be connecting to. And notice that this user cannot see the test database. Why do you think that is? Exactly, yeah. So there's no permissions for it to look at it, so it's not even going to show that. So we're going to configure this ODBC connection. That's an ODBC connection. From here, everything in Windows will see this database connection as Drupal only. It will not know anything about everything else. So if you would like access to be prompted for password, then don't include password in the ODBC connection definition. So you're okay for that, and okay here. So now inside of access, look what I can do. I can go under data, and if you are not using the newest version of Office, which has that little ribbon here, you would go to a file menu, you would say file, import, and then ODBC would be one of the options. Here you actually have to say, go from other sources, look for ODBC, and now I have Drupal. I say OK, and it connects to my database. Notice how cool this is. I'm running the database in the virtual machine, which is Windows XP, and I'm connecting from Windows 7, and it's connecting to a different system. And now I can scroll down to my system table. There it is. And I can say, okay, take the system table and with all the columns, next, next, finish. And now I am importing that 128 rows that were in the database right into Excel. Now if this is a list of customers, first name, last name, their address, that's very useful because from Excel you can do like a mail to merge and envelopes and stuff like that. That's pretty cool. But in addition to Excel, now let's try Access. So we go to Excel, all programs, Office, and Access. And now we're going to say, hey, we need a blank database, so that's great, blank database. We don't want to create a new table. We'll have a blank database, that's what we wanted. Now we'll say this, external data, go from ODBC, and this is the coolest thing about it all. Okay, I'll use the word cool way too often. So the reason why it's really great is because you can either import the data, which is a one-time copy. It'd be nice for maybe a backup, or maybe you have a developer that's really skilled with Access and they can do miracles. We'll have them work on that copy of the data. But then you can also link to the database, which means that every change that's in Access database is going to be also changed in MySQL. Suddenly, you can have hundreds of people work on an Access database and nothing gets confused. And they can be from multiple locations as long as IP connectivity is present. So if you have a really nice Access database and you want to take it to the next level where a lot of people can use it, you can take the tables, put them in MySQL, and keep all your forms, all your reports, all your VB scripts behind it. So we will link, we'll say OK, and now it says, okay, you want to link something, select the correct ODBC connectivity, no password required because it's all embedded. We say OK, and now it's going to scan the tables. We will say, I want this ugly table called system. I want to say OK, and notice this automatically created a table, an Access table, out of my MySQL database. And the cool thing is that I can change this and I can add something to it and I can save it. Alright? So now we are working with Access. We're working with Access, that's alright. We're working with Access and couldn't change it. Anybody can tell me why? I went here, I said enter, and it says, whoa, update on the linked table system failed. Exactly. So when I created that user Drupal or demo, I said select only. If I said allow update, then it would do that. So escape that change. Is that cool? Yeah, because from here you can do all the tricks that Access allows you to do. Plus, most people, even at our college, you will take Intro to Databases, and that's in Access. You even take Advanced Database, and that's in Access, right? So people tend to learn Access as their first database. And it's a very powerful tool, but the moment you have 5 or more users, it slows down to a crawl. It's hard to make a server out of it. So imagine an application that started in Access. You now distributed this Access database to everybody in the office, and now you can write a PHP interface on the web for your customers to look at everything. The secretary can put in all the addresses, the salesman can put all the products in, all the invoices, and then the customer can browse the product line right off the PHP website. It's all coming from the same database. Alright, that's what the web databases will do for you. Basically, it allows you to connect everybody and use any of those tools. Alright. Yeah, we'll talk about that when we get to creating tables. Primary keys is just a type of a column, like an ID column that defines each row to be unique. And we'll talk more about that, you know, when to use and how they're helpful with connecting with other tables. But for now, you know, the message is that, hey, MySQL is just the database, but there are so many tools that will allow you to connect to MySQL. And most of them are free, okay? SQL browser or query browser is free, Administrator is free, PHP MyAdmin is free. Excel could be free. If you sign up, the school has this MSDNA program where you can get some Microsoft software for free. If you have OpenOffice, you can also connect to MySQL from that. So, from here, there's only one more tool that I wanted to show you, and that is how can you connect a PHP script to the database, because that's important to us. We want to know how to connect a web page. And so here's how you do it. The first thing you want to do is you want to go to php.net/MySQL, because I don't remember. Okay, I could have written it down, but I don't remember. I did write it down once. Remember, I wrote it on the board. Yep. So that was it. So here is a nice rundown of what MySQL is all about, and we want to go to an example. And here is a great example that shows us how we can connect a MySQL database. What I will do is I'll take the example, copy paste it, and I'll show you how it works. Then I'll limit it only to the very bare bones of what is required. I'll copy this example from the manual, and as we did in previous labs, we need to go to the Drupal site and we need to create a file. Here the file will be called, I'm just picking up the name, I'll call it MySQL data.php. Now it's a PHP file. I can go to edit it with some IDE like this one, and I paste in the example. Actually, I'm not going to do that because I'm not sure if the recording would pick that up. Okay, so let's stretch this a little bit. Okay, the first part of our script, this is a comment, of course, creates the connection. What am I going to put under host here? Localhost. What am I going to put under, under user? Root would be fine. And if I'm using root, what's for the password? Nothing. Empty. Yeah, exactly. So notice that this connectivity information is the same as we've used with all the other tools. Same connectivity information. So if the connection is not available, could not connect, and then tell me what's wrong. Is access denied? Is there no connectivity? Now echo, I connected. Fine. Next, in the GUI, remember I had to issue use Acquia Drupal? That's what it means right here. So I have to specify the name of the database, Acquia Drupal. Now if this is not successful, then show me an error message. Finally, I have a select statement, and the select that we've been working with was select all from system. Finally, query is getting executed, and this example here is going to draw automatically a table and then display each column. I will simplify that in a moment, okay? But I want to show you how the example works. So I'll save it. I go back to localhost. MySQL data is the name of the file, and it's spinning, and look, it shows all the 128 rows of data just the same as every one of the other clients. But the cool thing is that now this is my own web page. I can modify this to whatever extent I need to. I can add functionality. I can do anything with this data. Let me simplify this example. Let's strip this to bare bones of what's needed. Okay, I don't need the comments. Comments are very important, but for the demo I don't need them. I don't need to create the link reference. This is important when you connect to more than one database. When you connect to a single database, then MySQL Connect will create a default connection, and that's what we want. I don't need to check whether the database is connected or not. I don't need to have an error message. So this is the bare bones so far. I will skip connect successfully. Next, the only thing I need is make sure to select the right database. Now we're going to connect. We're going to create this SQL query, which is great. Now I'm going to issue the SQL query. All of this other stuff was it was optional. It was helpful with errors, but I want you to see what a required set of code would be here. So here's what's happening. Query is simply a string. It's a string. I could have put this string and pasted it into parentheses, would be fine. But it's just good good practice to create a separate SQL string and then issue it into the query function. Result here, the result is simply a reference to the data inside of the database. It's not the data itself, it's a pointer to where the record set will start. Record set is the entire set of all the rows that the database is going to display to us. That's the record set. Next, we're not going to be adding any additional code. We're going to say line equals fetch array We can skip this entire side because that's the default value. And let me rebuild this particular loop so that it is easy. I'm going to delete MySQL free result and MySQL close because when our PHP file closes, it automatically releases the connection. Alright? Okay, so I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines so far which are required. I will go ahead and say echo, and here is where I'm going to extract only one column. Let's take the column called name. Okay, it's short and reasonable. We'll only display the names on this page. To do that, we'll say display the name, and right after the name put a break on our page so that each name, each row is displayed as a new line. Okay, when you look at this code right here, does it look reasonable? Okay, do all of the lines here make sense? Reasonable amount of sense? This line is actually wrong. What I meant to say here was this. Who can tell me what line is? What type of a structure is that? What programming structure is that? It's not a function. Starts with an A. Array, exactly. So that's why we needed arrays, is because line sometimes is I am used to, the example uses line. I am used to using the word row because this array represents the row of data, and I can pick one column or multiple columns out of that row, and every time it says echo row, it'll take the next row and display from it. So let's save this as it is. Let's go to the page, let's refresh, and look, on my page I'm displaying just the name column. Okay, this is what the HTML tag text looks like. This is the code. Does that make sense? The last 2 weeks we spent on PHP so that you can see how the database is connected to the web page. You can add images. You can add everything that HTML can do in the browser. And you can connect the database to it. Very useful thing to do. So you can use Access as a very rich GUI interface to your application, and then you can use PHP to write self-service for the customers to access the system. Alright, so let's run through that again. PHP is one of the tools that we can use to access the database. We can use the MySQL Administrator, which allows us to administer the database. We can use the query browser, which allows us to get the very data. If I was to modify this and say select only the name, then this data looks very similar to the data that we see on the web page. We can use the command line, and on the command line we can use the same let's see, I think we would want to go back to Acquia, and we'll say select name from system, and this is the same display, right, the same data as we saw in the query browser and as we saw on the web page. Finally, you can export the data to Access database. You can base your forms and reports on this. You can export the data to Excel, and you can do all the merges of mail or otherwise functionality that Excel would do. Any questions about the tools used to access the MySQL database? After today, it's important that you know how to connect to the database, and next week we'll talk in detail about what those select statements are all about. Okay, I'll show you how to connect multiple tables together, how to use the where clause. But now you can see why we looked at the PHP code earlier and why we looked at HTML, because this is the connectivity to those classes. We can now connect to the database. We can extract data from the database. We can use forms to add. I could say something like, show me where name equals get X. Okay, something like this. And when I do that, I could say X equals aggregator. And there's an error. Let's see. I messed it up. Select all from system where name equals, it's missing single quotes around. For that matter, I'm going to actually change it to like. And I'll tell you next week what like does. Save, and now let's refresh. Here's the aggregator, and now I can modify this to look for all of them that start with letter A. I already have an application here, and all I did is I simply modified so that whatever comes in the URL, make sure to put in the SQL statement. Right? So that's how we make the connection between the database and the web page. There are other tools to work with, but the bottom line is, if you learn a little bit of HTML, you learn the JavaScript, master PHP, you can do anything you want on the website. And that's what we see in the business, that banks go online, everything goes online, because whatever it is that you can do inside of the database, you can do that through the web browser now. Good deal. Questions? All right, so let's stop the recording here.